So I thought that was an important distinction. And then I read this book by a guy named Parker Palmer called The Courage to Teach. Has anybody read this? Right? So good. And so what Parker Palmer clarified for me when I was trying to figure out this question about the how was the ideal classroom is subject-centered. And the subject could be anything. It could be a math problem, it could be a poem. If you're in elementary school, it could be a grasshopper that you just brought in from outside. But the role of the adult, the role of the teacher, is to authoritatively, skillfully, Socratically help the community inquire into that subject. And Parker Palmer calls it the great thing. Capital T, capital G, capital T, the great thing. Whatever that is. And I thought, that's it. That's the distinction, because if it's a subject-centered classroom, my role as the educator is still to be the facilitator. But now there's no hierarchy, right? I mean, any of us can have the insight into the great thing that helps everybody else understand it more. That's what learning is. So then I started to think, right, so then all we have to do is we just have to focus on the how, right? Forget the what. The how is what matters, right? Not quite either. And this brings us to this campaign and this present day and what we're hoping to do in a larger level and also just as this group of people. So if you look at any of the most popular reforms right now in education, they're about the what or the how. It's either about content or it's about pedagogy. And don't get me wrong, content and pedagogy matter. But if you think about it, it's an outside-in approach to schooling. We began by trying to address the issues that are most clear. Because content can be made very clear, right? What are you going to teach? And then pedagogy can even though it's elusive and we all know it's an art, not a science, you can at least start to get at those issues. But what I started to realize, and what is really at the core of all of this, is that learning, powerful learning, when it occurs from the inside out. It's the exact opposite. So for the last 2 years, I have been gathering stories from anybody and everybody that I've met, from students to social workers to the Secretary of Education to, famous people, average folks like us, people like Steve Moore, who I had never met until this morning, even though we've had lots of exchanges. And the whole purpose was to find out, okay, well, if we ask everybody, when and where were you when you learned best, what will we discover? Are there any common attributes so that whether somebody's talking about 3rd grade or a church mission or an Outward Bound course, there are some core conditions that allow that learning to be powerful. And guess what we learned? Powerful learning is never primarily about content. Which is not to say that content is not important, but powerful learning, when it occurs, is personal, it's risky, it's challenging, and it primarily is about helping an individual better understand who they are and what they want to do and be in the world. So what I started to realize is, well, what would happen if we shifted the paradigm? What would happen if we moved from an outside-in model of schooling that proceeds in trying to problem solve from clear to fuzzy, to an inside-out model of schooling that proceeds from fuzzy to clear? So the first question is, who is the self that learns? Who is the self that teaches? Why does it matter? To be free. Why do we learn? To be free. What does that mean? Back to my opening questions, right? What does it mean to be free? What I have come to believe is that what it means to be free, and we see this happening all around the world, right? This is like the year of freedom and upheaval from the Middle East to Wisconsin. What it means to be free is to have a chance to discover your full worth and unleash your full potential on the world. That's what it means to be free. To discover your worth and to unleash your potential. And how do people learn? Personally, interpersonally, transformationally, riskily, experientially, engagingly in the presence of others. So what would happen if we were able to bring about such a shift? What would happen if we could continue to gather stories and turn things around? I think it would change the world. I think we would create different systems to support adults and young people. I think we would start to evaluate our own success and each other's success by a very different set of metrics. I think we would realize that what matters most is helping people discover the power and uniqueness of their own voice. And the only way we can get there, and it's time for me to shuffle off the stage, the only way we can get there is by giving each of us an opportunity to begin by first situating ourselves in our own lived experiences and thinking about when and where was I when I learned best? And how can I start to apply those insights more directly in the work that I do, whether I'm a teacher or a parent or a leader of a nonprofit or somebody that aspires to be a good neighbor. So what today is about is trying to, with this group of people, breathe a little more life into that theory of change. And Steve's going to model it in a moment, and then what's going to follow is an opportunity for me to say, don't take my word for it. Spend some time today thinking about and sharing your story and hearing a few other people's stories, so that then before we all leave and go back to our respective lives, we can think together, what needs to happen in Kansas City to ensure that those types of insights are